Alright, so I'm watching Lou Dobbs Tonight on CNN, and Lou likes to talk about the liberal biased media. And every time I hear that, I wonder, does that include CNN? Because, yeah, they do have their critics. I like to be informed, but I don't care for slanted reporting, and I can't usually stomach commentary, whether it's leaning left or right. For example, whenever the president gives a speech, I do not watch it on network TV. I watch it on C-SPAN. That way, when the president is done, all I hear is silence, or the murmur of people in the audience. I don't hear any commentaries. No reporters, no pundits trying to divine the meaning behind what he said, despite the fact that he was speaking English the whole time. Instead, I'm left with my thoughts, and I'm allowed to form my own opinions. America, you should try it. I guess it's just become kind of a fact of life, that yes, there's bias in the media. There you can't get away from it. No matter where you go, there's always going to be a slant in one direction or another. But that forces me to ask, where do I go for my information? Sure, there are watchdog groups that are more than willing to, pounce on anything that even remotely resembles a bias toward one political philosophy or another, but don't watchdog groups themselves have their own agenda that they're trying to push forward? I mean, being a cynical American, I have to assume that they do. So my solution to this quandary is to simply gather my information from as many sources as possible. When I'm watching news on TV, I'm usually flipping between the major networks to see, what part of the story that they're covering. I read news papers. I also like the wire services, like the Associated Press and Reuters. And I gather my information from as many sources as possible, and then I try to distill the facts from the opinions. When the news is on TV, I'm not always sitting there watching it with, my remote switching between, Shepard Smith and Anderson Cooper. I usually just have it on in the background, which begs the question, what would the best channel be to have on in the background? I miss the old headline news. Ever since Rudy Bakhtiar left, it's just gone totally down the toilet. So, how do I choose a cable news channel if they're all suspect of being biased? I'm not a watchdog. I do not have the time or the resources to really go in depth and, analyze the style of every single reporter and, where they might lean one way or another. What I've decided to do instead is to compare their programming schedule. And this turned out to be very enlightening. Now, I boiled it down to the three big news channels on cable: CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. I considered including CNBC, but I don't think a reputable news station would pimp out even 1 second of its programming schedule to infomercials. So my next step was to pick a random weekday and compare their schedules for a 24-hour period. I even made a chart. So, what did I learn by comparing the programming schedules of CNN, Fox, and MSNBC? Well, first of all, let's talk about their news programming. Now, I'm going to give them all the benefit of a doubt that their news programming is limited to reporting the news. Just facts, no opinions. Frankly, I'm leery of any network that would consider asking Newt Gingrich, Mike Huckabee, or Karl Rove to put the news into perspective. Yeah, that was a slam on Fox. What are you going to do about it? It's my blog. In addition to their news programming, they also have opinion programming, and this is where you get your Dobbs and your Olbermanns and your Hannitys and your Glenn Becks, and they also have entertainment programming. Well, of course, the news these days does try to be entertaining. They got ratings to track too. The main entertainment I saw on the schedules was Larry King on CNN, and MSNBC has like Al Roker specials and shows about prisons. I figured I would judge these networks based on the balance that they have between news and opinion. The channel with the least amount of news programming is MSNBC. In fact, they have as much as 13 straight hours dedicated to Chris Matthews, Keith Olbermann, and Rachel Maddow. And their shows are only an hour long. So for half the day, they just put them in a loop. Matthews and Olbermann and Maddow and Matthews and Olbermann and Maddow and lions and tigers and bears. Oh, please. Fox News does marginally better than MSNBC with only 10 hours of pundit programming, 8 hours of it consecutive. Of course, that includes Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, Greta Van Susteren, and Glenn Beck. But they do show a bit of favoritism toward O'Reilly and Van Susteren because they dedicate 3 hours each to them. Hannity and Beck only get 2 hours. Again, all of their shows, 1 hour long. So they put it on a loop. Then we get to CNN, which has 19 hours of news. 13 of those hours are consecutive, which sounds perfectly appropriate for a channel with news in its title. Get the hint? Fox News Channel. And you're not off the hook either, MSNBC. Oh yeah, sure, one of your pundits might be kind of cute, but Keith Olbermann's days as a silver fox are numbered. And CNN only has one pundit, Lou Dobbs, a conservative. And he only gets repeated once, so he's on for 2 hours a night. So, after all this, which channel am I going to stick with for my default television news? I'm going to stick with CNN. Of course, I will check the other channels, because I do like to see how others report the news. They've got their angle. I've got mine. A friend of mine once told me that he doesn't watch the Communist News Network because it's biased. And I asked him, well, what do you watch? And he says, I like Fox. Why do you like Fox? Because it presents the news from a perspective that I agree with. It's been my experience that people who rely on a single source for their information and place all their trust in it have absolutely no genuine interest in being informed. They just want to be placated.